Hello and welcome to God in Film, the podcast where a Christian and an atheist dive into the best that cinema has to offer and see if we find any parallels with the gospel or any other Bible stories. I'm filmmaker, dirty vest wearer, Giles Goff.
And I'm librarian and criminal mastermind, Julia Hall.
And today we'll be looking at the 1988 classic, Die Hard. Julia, what does Die Hard mean to you?
Die Hard is actually a fairly new addition to my film repertoire. So I only actually watched this for the first time a couple of years ago because a now ex-student of mine was like, Miss, what do you mean you've never seen Die Hard? I don't care that it's July. You need to go watch it now. So I watched it for the first time a couple of years ago and I was... What's the word? I was entertained by how clever it is. Because don't get me wrong, I love a good action film. Sometimes all you want is to watch two people shoot at each other or punch each other until the cows come home. But Die Hard has such this underlying intelligence that I just really appreciated. Everything seems to just tie in together so well.
Even the porno poster, the pornographic poster in one of the rooms that's being constructed, that has a reason for being there, and it's so that as he goes through, whenever he passes it, it reminds you that you've been there before, so it helps you to get an internal layout in your head of what the upper floors of Nakatomi Plaza look like.
Reading a lot of the cast and crew interviews when I was doing the research for this, a lot of it was very specific. They thought a lot about, because essentially it's almost like a closed room mystery. You've got one setting, one place to be. You have to make all of those different places interesting, and especially in office building. One office in an office building is very much like another office in an office building. So making them all unique is a big challenge.
Yeah, definitely. So, have you got some facts for us?
I might have a few.
A cheeky sauce.
We can start off with the short and sweet ones.
Yeah.
So Die Hard is a 1988 film. It's directed by John McClane and obviously stars Bruce Willis, Alan Rickman and Bonnie Bedelia. It's based on a novel which I didn't know until I did the research, which is called Nothing Lasts Forever, which was a sequel to a novel called The Detective, which are both by Roderick Thorpe, and I believe Frank Sinatra was in the film adaptation of The Detective.
Okay.
But it's not one that I've seen, and I can't...
No.
I don't know about you, I can't quite envision Frank Sinatra as an action hero.
I can, but I've seen him in From Here to Eternity, and he has to be a soldier in that, so he has to hold a gun. So that gets me a little bit of the way there. But also, he's so little. Frank Sinatra. He's such a teeny little fella.
Because Guys and Dolls is primarily the only thing I've really seen him in, where he plays the gambling rapscallion Nathan, who takes forever to actually, so much so that she sings an entire song about how annoying it is that he won't marry her.
Hang on, I may have to retract what I said earlier about Frank Sinatra. He's 5'7.5" tall. I'm 5'8", so he's...
He's smaller than you know?
Yeah, let's just be utter bullies about this. He's a tiny little pixie fella, He would have been able to fit into those vents and swing a cane as he was doing it. He had that much space,
Exactly. A lot of my facts, as I'm reading them now, they revolve largely around Alan Rickman, which I think is only just because...
It seems entirely reasonable.
Entirely reasonable because he's incredible in this film.
I'm aware that other people are actually technically in the film as well. But
yeah, I was vaguely aware that there were other people there, but mostly you're there for Alan Rickman, don't lie. For pretty much his first Hollywood film role, he absolutely knocks it out of the park. But it was his idea that Hans Gruber should have this kind of tailored, suited aesthetic rather than the sort of casual combat gear that the terrorists wear. And in his words, I got Joel saying, "Get the hell out of here, you'll wear what you're told." But when I came back, I was handed a new script. It showed that it pays to have a little bit of theatre training, which I thought was, classically Alan Rickman. Right. Yeah. The other thing I found really interesting was the scene, spoilers, by the way, there's going to be spoilers in these facts, when he is dropped from the top of Nakatomi Plaza. The gear used to film that fall was military tech, because regular cameras at the time were really struggling to have Rickman stay in focus, because you're
Yeah, you
close to the
go out of
camera and then
focus
you're
as you...
dropping really quickly.
Yeah.
So it was actually military based technology that helped make that possible. I'm not sure why the military are developing these kinds of cameras. Thank God they did.
I have a horrible feeling I know the answer to that, and I assume it's that when you're
What,
about
Bobby
to bomb
Bird?
people, you need stuff to be in focus the entire time, even when you're very far away. So
Yeah,
that
probably.
is wow.
I would much prefer it to be used to shoot Alan Rickman falling off a building, you know?
Yeah, if we have to, if, like the Pentagon comes in and says, "All right, Julia, here's your choices," you know.
Alan Rickman every time. So the producer for this film was Joel Silver, who is quite, from what I gather off IMDb, I'm not an expert, is quite big in this sort
Yeah.
of area of films. But he's got 3 rules for action films, all of which apply to Die Hard. Number 3 is, in his words, we're going to get an R rating anyway, so let's see some hot babes. Fine, fair enough. I can
Fair
get
enough.
behind that. Number 2 is shoot as much comedy as you can. If it's too much, you can cut it out later. And I think Die Hard is one that has just got one-liners and quips all the way through. And number 1 is these movies are hate movies. They're like romance movies, only they're hate movies. In a romantic picture, a boy and a girl have a meet cute, they have several dates, and they go off together. In a hate movie, they have a meet cute, they have several dates, and one kills the other. And the writer D'Souza really, I feel, took this to heart because the scene where Gruber and McClane meet for the first time and Gruber pretends to be an American hostage was actually not initially in the first runs of the script.
Right.
It was only when D'Souza found out that Rickman could do a really convincing American accent on set that he was like, I know exactly what I need to put in there. And that the flexibleness of the script was something else that I found when I was doing my research, is that certain characters that were meant to die early, or some meant to die at all. Theo, the tech genius, was actually supposed to die, but the scene that replaced it was when Gruber and McClane meet for the first time. But depending on different performances that the actors gave, meant that their characters stayed alive just a little bit longer. So the scene where Uli takes a chocolate bar out from the concession stand earned him a few more minutes of screen time. So I like to imagine there was a bit of competition, perhaps, as to who could eke out the most time in front of the cameras.
I can't tell you how anxious that makes me feel, right? Because as a filmmaker, anything I do, I'm always terrified it's never actually going to get made, because most of the time, 90% of the time, nobody's flipping paying me. It doesn't matter whether it gets made or not. So I plan things within an inch of their lives. There are very few outtakes on any of my projects because nobody has any time for funny flipping messing around when I'm filming, you know? So I've made all the creative decisions. I've thought about it. I've aggressively, played things out in my head at the traffic lights or looking after the kids, or sometimes when I'm tutoring. So the idea that they could just be that flexible and just switch things up just really throws me quite a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of ad-libbing. So the classic line from Ellis when he goes to do his bit to parlay with the terrorists, and he goes, Hans, Bobby, completely ad-lib. So Rickman's quizzical look is somewhat genuine, but there's, I think, the scene where you first meet him, there's the inference that he is taking perhaps some extra recreational additions.
Just get through the night, yeah.
That was also his idea, which initially the director absolutely hated, but Hart Butcher, who plays him, I think managed to grind him down until eventually he allowed it. So on the whole, there seems to be a lot of ad-libbing and playing around with the script, which I just think gives, knowing that and watching the film, it gives it that extra air of fun. I think you can really tell that everybody's having a good time when they make it.
Definitely, 100%.
And thus concludes Julia's facts.
Thanks for those facts, Julia. That's brilliant. Now, let's just snuck through the air vents in a very grubby vest, carrying her own machine gun.
Hello!
Hi!
It's me!
Ladies and golf. Ladies.
I mean, it's not inaccurate.
It is just ladies and golf, isn't it?
It's been a long week, you guys. It's been a long week. Ladies and gents, Mrs. Goff has entered the chat, and as we let her do pretty much whatever she wants to do on this podcast, she's come in midway through. How you doing, darling?
I'm doing good, baby. How you doing?
Stop flirting with me. Stop flirting with me. I'm too tired and emotional to know what to do with it. So I put a call out to guests for this one, and how can I put this? I knew deep in my heart of hearts that as soon as I put this request out, there would be somebody who would be first in line to talk about it. I could have practically set my watch by how quickly he filled out the form. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name's Andy Godfrey. I am an evangelist with an organisation called Outreach UK. I've been in full-time Christian work for 40 years. I'm also the film reviewer for Pure 247 Radio, as well as Sorted, the magazine for men, Christian magazine for men. And I'm the author of a book called Confessions of a Christian Film Critic. And it's great to be here on this podcast.
Andy, it is so lovely to have you back on the show again. I feel like you've got a season ticket for God in Film. You know, you just show up whenever you want, you know?
No. Well, I'd love to show up more, Giles. It's just great to be on. You know me, I'll talk about movies till the cows come home. Particularly favourite movies like this one.
Let's get into it. How did Die Hard come to be?
Yeah, Die Hard, 1988 film based on the 1979 novel. So the novel was called Nothing Lasts Forever. It was one of those sort of books that you'd pick up at an airport, really, as a sort of, that's how it sort of sold. It became quite a big hit, particularly in the States. This story of a gang of thieves breaking into the vault in a multi-story building in Los Angeles. The film was produced by 20th Century Fox. They needed a big hit. They'd been through a bit of a lull, and they really needed a big hit. Expectations were not high. People read the novel, people looked at this and thought, hang on a minute, is this really going to make a good film? But Fox threw a lot of money at it, and they approached every single star going. I mean, there is a rumour, Giles, that they even approached Fred Astaire. I mean, can you imagine Fred Astaire dancing his way through the Nakatomi Plaza? They certainly approached Fred Astaire. They approached Harrison Ford. They approached Arnold Schwarzenegger. They produced Sylvester Stallone. Everybody turned it down. Everybody. They just didn't think this was going to be a big hit, this story of a man on his own going up against a bunch of thieves in a multi-story building. So eventually, bottom of the list, literally, they approached Bruce Willis.
What, that guy from Moonlight?
That guy from Moonlighting, yeah, with Sybil Shepherd, yeah. who was always breaking the fourth wall, if you remember the show, and talking to the camera. They approached him, they offered him $5 million for the role. Now, that was a lot of money for somebody who'd never made a feature film before. But they thought eventually we've got to have somebody. They decided to take a risk on Willis. Do you know there were some posters that were released before the film came out that did not have Bruce Willis's image on them because they were so unsure of how he was going to sell. The other problem was finding a villain.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that Brits make the best villains.
Yes,
and they
absolutely.
approached Alan Rickman, who was only known as a stage actor, really. He'd never done a major film before. So this was Alan Rickman's big break into movies as well. Expectations were not high. But on top of the $5 million that they gave to Bruce, they set a budget of $35 million. Most of that was spent on the location because it's actually filmed in the 20th Century Fox Plaza building. They just changed the name to Nakatomi Towers. All the interiors, of course, are done in the studio. So whenever you see the cityscapes of Los Angeles through the windows, those are all just massive paintings. Everything else was done in the studio. But that was it, really. They had no confidence in it. They didn't think it was going to fly. They were quite happy to go with Bruce Willis, who nobody had really heard of outside of TV. They were happy to go with Alan Rickman. And they just thought, let's make it and see what happens. But you think of all those great actors, and of course Schwarzenegger and Stallone later were heard to comment that they wished they'd taken it. Of course, they regretted it turning it down because it became such a big success. I mean, you also had a fairly untried director. You had a fairly untried special effects team. So basically, this was 20th Century Fox taking a risk on what had been a very successful novel and saying, let's see what comes of it. And what came of it, of course, was hugely successful.
Mind you, this film doesn't work without those two central performances, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman are absolutely inextricable to the success of this one, I think,
Absolutely. And both are so laid back.
Mm.
Willis is very laid back right from the outset. We see him carrying a big teddy bear right at the beginning. We see Alan Rickman, really self-confident in what he's doing, what his character's doing. He says to Willis's wife, to Bonnie Belinda, he says, "We are not thieves, madam. We are exceptional thieves." It's a great line. And I just think that without those two, without the charisma, and that scene at the end, there are two scenes where they meet, one right at the end, and there's one sort of about 3/4 of the way through where they encounter each other. And they really spark off each other. They really do. And I just love the dialogue and the yippee-ki-yay and all that. We won't go complete the phrase. But I just think that those two really do spark at each other. And it was great. And, Willis earned his money. We've got to remember the supporting cast as well. Bonnie Belinda, who is one of Hollywood's most underused actresses. I mean, she's great. Speaking of Bonnie Belinda, most people only think of her as being in this. She was, and Die Hard 2, she was actually in one of the Jack Ryan films, but she didn't do a lot of movies. And it's such a shame because she's such a skilled actor. You've got Reginald John Hodgson as the character of Al, who Bruce Willis's character befriends. You've got some other great actors as well in this. And I just think there's a lot of humour. There are some scenes set in a TV studio. And one of them says, by now the hostages will be developing Helsinki syndrome. And the TV presenter says, Helsinki, Denmark. Everybody just looks at him. And there's a lot of humour. There's a lot of Bruce Willis self-deprecating himself, which is really good. He's almost breaking the fourth wall. Not quite.
Yeah.
But almost. The scene where he's in the air vents, crawling along, trying to escape from the bad guy. And by the way, his T-shirt changes colour. I mean, one of the great bloopers of cinema history is the fact that Bruce Willis is wearing a white T-shirt. He ends up wearing a grey one. Never mind, who cares? It doesn't matter. It got grey in the shaft. But he's talking about, come out to Los Angeles, have a nice weekend, have a good Christmas, play with the kids, eat a nice dinner. No, I got to, I got to crawl through this vent trying to kill these bad guys. It's just funny. It's entertaining. At the same time, it's exciting. Some of the stunts are terrific. They did employ some of Hollywood's top stuntmen on this. And Jean Valjean, who shot it, went on to make Speed. So the director of photography went on to make Speed. So he obviously learned a lot through the action scenes on this. I'm wearing the Die Hard T-shirt jumper, which says, "Now I have a machine gun, ho ho." There's a lot of humour in this. It's a really funny, entertaining film, but it does get the pulses racing as well. There's a lot of action. And of course, the other comic duo is the two FBI guys, Johnson and Johnson. Is that Agent Johnson? Yeah, this is Agent Johnson. No, this is Agent Johnson. And they black out Los Angeles, a quarter of Los Angeles on Christmas Eve.
So what would you say is the cultural impact of Die Hard?
For starters, it spawned a franchise, Giles. I mean, there were 4 more Die Hard films. I think what it did was it brought about a revival in action films. Definitely brought about a revival in action. I mean, in the wake, but also action films where one man was up against it. Where one man takes on a whole gang. So I was sort of looking up earlier today films inspired by Die Hard. And you've got things like Under Siege, you've got Cliffhanger, you've got Air Force One, you've got the aforementioned Speed, you've got The Rock, you've got a remake of High Noon came out in the wake of this, The Raid. So basically, it inspired filmmakers to look at I think to some extent it almost reawakened Bond movies as well. The Bond producers think, Bond is our hero, and we really just need to focus on him against the bad guys. And when you look at some of the later Bond films, he really is very much. I mean, he always was on his own, but he had other people around him. Some of the later Bond films, some of the Bond films at that time, he's on his own dealing with the situation. So I think Speed and Under Siege and Air Force One, Passenger 57 was another one. Cliffhanger possibly was another one that you could argue was inspired by Die Hard. The man taking on the gang.
I think probably one of the most sort of pertinent things is, and one of the most complimentary things is when the name of a film effectively becomes like an entire descriptor, you know. So Speed is Die Hard on a bus, Under Siege is Die Hard on a ship, and so on
exactly.
And so forth.
Air Force One is Die Hard on a plane.
Yeah,
you know, and that was Harrison Ford. And again, some of these actors who turned down, Die Hard, go on to make action films because they think, hang on a minute, we were crazy,
and yet Die Hard they're never going to make that mistake again. Yeah.
Die Hard surpasses all. I mean, it wasn't critically well received on its release.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it got a bit of a panning from the critics, but it's one of those films that the critics didn't like, but the public did.
Yeah.
And it just over the years has become so popular. I mean, it made back its money. I got a statistic here somewhere that it opened in 21 theaters in 13 cities in the States in 1988, and it earned $6 million in each, an average of $6 million in each theater. So that's pretty good. It was considered a risk, but it did earn back its money. And of course, once they released it worldwide, the sky was the limit,
Andy, thank you so much for that. That is the comprehensive interview on Die Hard. That is what historians will be coming to in years from now for the entire sum off of it.
There's more to be said, but yeah, I hope so. Well, can I just mention one more thing very quickly to look out for when you're watching Die Hard?
Go for it.
Right at the end, Alan Rickman's character falls from the tower, right? Watch the look on his face. They had told him he was going to fall into a big mattress. They had told him on the count of 5, we're going to let you go.
Okay.
Remember, it's Alan Rickman's first film. He's hanging there on a wire. They said, on the count of 5, we're going to let you go. They cut the wire on the count of 2. That's why you got the look on Alan Rickman's face, because he wasn't expecting that. So just something to look out for. That's true.
Andy, thank you so much for coming back on the show. You are welcome anytime you want.
Just give us a shout, Giles, and I'll be there.
So, Julia, that was Andy Godfrey. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in the spirit of improvisation, poor Alan Rickman cannot get a break.
Yeah, you ever heard that thing about if you watch Die Hard right after Love Actually, you see him get killed for treating Emma Thompson so badly?
Damn.
That I might have to do that. When I finish recording here, I'm going to set a little marathon up.
AI is going on at such a rate that what I want to see is Emma Thompson replacing Bruce Willis in my own personal version of Die Hard.
Yes.
Where Emma Thompson runs around as Jane McClane and gets to kill Alan Rickman.
And like the watch instead is like because it's a bracelet, isn't it? He gives her in the film. Yeah, so it can be like it all ties together.
Yes.
Now it's time for Finding Their Faith in the Film.
Da, 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 da.
Fantastic. Now, I'll be honest, Julia, there are a few times where I've thought a film would make for a good seasonal episode. And as this is, believe it or not, the 5th God in Film Christmas special.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, so we've got, what is it? There's Miracle. No, let's do this in order. No, I've totally blanked. Jimmy Stewart. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life. Muppets Christmas Carol. Miracle on 34th Street. Little Women. And if you can believe it, the 5th God in Film. We'll be on to 5 years pretty soon.
That's wild.
That's mental.
But like a little lockdown project. This has gone on a while.
Yeah, it's gone on. Really should be wrapping this up by now, you know? But as this is the 5th God in Film Christmas special, I am running low on ideas. I suggested this to you, and I knew it would be popular, and I just hoped I would come up with something, but I've got literally nothing.
You just wanted an excuse to watch Bruce Willis run around in a vest.
Apparently so. Apparently that's what I needed. John McClane might have a lot in common with Republican Jesus, but he doesn't have a lot in common with the actual canonical Son of God. So we turn to the big theological question of our time, and it's bigger than the squabbles over Vatican II, bigger than the Reformation. Not since the First Nicene Council in 325 AD have we had such a divisive and important question. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? I personally think I've been on a bit of a journey when it comes to this question. This did come up when I spoke to Andy Godfrey earlier, and I think he said it more succinctly than I could, so I'm going to hand over to him. And why, in your opinion, is this film a Christmas movie?
Oh, here we go.
Now, bear in mind, I do need clarity and conciseness on this one.
Okay, so it's set on Christmas Eve. The theme of the film is about reconciliation. Willis is going to Los Angeles to reconcile with. Don't go like that. Hear me out. Willis is going to Los Angeles to reconcile with his wife and to enjoy Christmas with his kids.
Mm-hmm.
This is about wanting a proper family Christmas. This is about families coming together to reconcile at Christmas. Now, he blows it in his first encounter with his ex-wife. He's absolutely stupid, and he hits his head against the mirror and says, "Good going, John," in what he says. I think that that's the first thing. Second
It's
thing
basically
is
George Bailey with a machine gun.
Yes, he is. He's carrying a big teddy bear. I mean, I don't know. He's carrying a big teddy bear. There's a Christmas party going on. There's Christmas music. When he gets in the limo, he says to Argyle, "Haven't you got any Christmas music?" Argyle's playing a rap song. He says, "This is Christmas music," and it goes on, and there's Christmas decorations everywhere. And it's this great theme. There's this great speech that he makes when he's crawling through the air vent about wanting to be with his family for Christmas dinner. When you get towards the end of the film, there is salvation. There is an unlikely hero. It's just a lovely Christmas movie. Bonnie Belinda talks to her kids at one point, and the kids say, "Mum, can't you come home?" And she says, "We'll see what Daddy and Santa can do." There is also this great line at the end where Argyle, the limo driver, says, "If this is their idea of Christmas, I got to be here for New Year. If this is their idea of Christmas, this is what Christmas is all about: excitement, fun, salvation, reconciliation, getting back with your family. This is the true meaning of Christmas." And to cap it all, Giles, Bruce Willis's wife is called Holly. You don't get more Christmassy than that. There is this lovely theme at the end where he gets back together with his wife, and that great scene at the end just before Al shoots the final bad guy, so we're giving away too many spoilers, aren't we? Where he introduces her to Al, and he says, "This is my wife, Holly De Niro," and she says no, and she says Holly McClane. So it's about reconciliation. It's about coming together at Christmas. It's about love at Christmas. That's what Die Hard is all about, and Jesus came into the world to defeat the bad guys, and the bad guys get defeated, and love wins through at Christmas.
So there we have it.
I have an alternative question.
Go for it.
Is it even a Christmassy movie if you haven't dressed a corpse in a Santa hat? I think that should be a requirement in future for all Christmas movies.
I feel like this is where we really understand the difference between knowledge and wisdom, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So knowledge is knowing that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Wisdom is knowing that you're not to put Die Hard on for the kids on the last day of term before school breaks up.
Yeah.
It is the tomato of Christmas movies. You wouldn't... Tomatoes
like
are
that.
fruit, don't put it in a fruit salad.
I like that analogy because I was actually reading an interesting theory, which I think I'm going to run past you guys and see what you think. And this was from Time Out, and they put to us that Die Hard shares similar, if not identical, parallels with It's a Wonderful Life.
Okay.
And I urge you to read the article because they explain this probably far better than I will, but I'll give you the cliff notes, which is that both these films start off by showing the protagonist what life would be like without them, right? So George is shown quite, from what I gather, I've not watched It's a Wonderful Life, but from what this article was telling me, people dying left and center, but a life without George is not a good one, right? The town where he lives in sorely misses his absence. And when John first arrives in LA, he also gets a taste of what life is like without him. His wife is not using her married name, she's using her maiden name. Some sleazy guy from the office is buying her Rolexes. He's got a little taste of what it is without him, which is the first kind of key point. The second point being that both the main characters have their own guardian angel. So in George's case, it's a literal guardian angel, although I believe he's not fully fledged he's like an intern guardian angel
He's earning his wings.
who's earning his wings. And John, of course, has Al, who is his sort of confidant kind of guardian angel that kind of keeps him going throughout the film. And finally they get to meet each other at the end of the film face to face, which is always, I think, a really touching moment. And then of course Al quite literally saves his life when Carl comes up swinging with a machine gun, I believe, or is it a machine gun? I forget now. But literally saves his life by shooting Carl. And then the last big parallel obviously being between Hans Gruber and Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter having a line about "you're worth more to me dead or than alive," which you could quite easily see Alan Rickman sneering at somebody in probably many of his roles. But yeah, the more I read this article, the more I was sold, to be fair. There does seem to be something there, perhaps. Straws grasped at, maybe.
I can just feel like the nails like pressing into your palm at how tightly you are grasping those straws, you know?
Hey, look,
Okay.
Matt.
I feel like Holly's life is pretty sweet without John McClane.
Yeah,
to be
she's
honest.
doing just great, you know?
She is
Yeah,
girl bossing
you
it
know.
up in LA.
Yeah,
You know,
by
you-
the end, she grasps the patriarchy again, doesn't she, with that married name thing coming in?
Yeah, so I think your homework, Julia, is to watch It's a Wonderful Life again.
I
and then,
should do,
and
considering
then
it's
listen to me talk about it on the God in Film episode on it, you know? Now I want to watch It's a Wonderful Life, you know? We've got to work our way through all of the back catalogue.
Too many emotions for me right now, Justin. Puts your heart through the ring on that one.
Fantastic. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you have been, thank you so much for listening. You might have noticed there's been a few less episodes than usual this year. I tried to fit in about 2 seasons a year, and there's a few reasons why it's not been as many. I've started a YouTube channel for my GCSE tutoring, sort of ranting about different GCSE texts. I've been doing this film called You Are Invited. I do my poem films. I'll leave a link to that. You can check that out there. Also, how can I put this? Having 2 kids is a lot, okay? It's, people are like, oh, you've got 1 kid. It's fine. You'll know what to do. No. You have no kids, and then you have 1 kid, right? And that is 100% more kids than you had before, right? And then you have another kid, and that is, check this out, 100% more kids than you had before. The only time you can start developing any kind of economy of scale is if you have 3 of the buggers, and I'm not doing it, frankly. Frankly, I will slam yeah, but you say that, and then you'll be like, oh, but I want another little baby because they're so little cute. And just
Friends keep fooling me.
honestly,
They betray me every time.
yeah, the hormones want you to be a trad wife. That's
Yeah,
what they
they
do.
do.
Not like a high flying editor and all the rest of it. You
the
know.
hormones can get stuffed.
Yeah, you just need to be like in a long floral print dress, turning milk and stuff like that. You know?
making bread at 5 a.m. because my
Starting
husband was craving
sentences
brioche.
Starting sentences with "speaking as a mother." You know. So we will try and get a few more episodes out for you next year. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We are definitely doing some more Star Trek and a few other bits and bobs. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have been, thank you for listening. Julie, have you had a good time?
I've had a great time. I've missed this. I've forgotten how much I missed this. So I've had a wonderful time.
I think I just got lazy after you did such a brilliant episode on The Craft. I'm like, oh, turns out being the co-host is a flipping walk in the park by comparison.
It's so easy.
So easy. You copy and paste from IMDb and you're done. Good Lord, you know. Claire, have you had a good time?
I've had a lovely time, thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you so much.
But are you going to throw a terrorist off a building to prove how much you love me? That's what I want to know.
Only if you want, darling. I was going to start with your ex-boyfriend. The one with the questionable hairline.
I mean, that seems like a severe response to...
I don't, just so many terrorists are so far away and you'd have to hunt them down and there's have to be like a rigorous trial beforehand.
But that
you know?
is the 80s way to prove your love.
Yeah, good point. Okay, all right.
So,
I will throw a terrorist off the building for you then,
thank you
darling.
very much.
That's true love right there.
Right. I love you.
I love you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop this now before it gets any weirder. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas, and we will see you in the new year. Bye.
Bye. God in Film is hosted and created by Giles Goff.
That's me.
Mixing and editing by Giles. Our logo was designed by
Julie Walsh.
And our theme tune was composed by
Rick Lee.
Please rate and review.
Please give us 5 stars because that's a nice thing to do.